One crisis significantly shapes our debates today: the Middle East conflict and the consequences of the brutal attack of Hamas. In our upcoming session, we want to shed a light on the crisis. What are the repercussions for the whole region, and how is Europe affected? The panel will be moderated by Magdalena Kirchner, Director of the Friedrich-Ebert-Stiftung Office for Yemen and the GCC countries, and an esteemed expert on the region. Welcome, Magdalena.
So, good evening. Thank you for those who stayed and to those who came back to, well, a quite hopefully not so depressing session, but I think certainly one where we can find an answer to the question, what would be the role for Europe? I would welcome our panelists, Norbert Röttgen, a member of the German Bundestag. I think I can also invite you. So, and Luigi de Maio, no, oh God. The EU Special Representative for the Gulf and former Minister of Foreign Affairs of Italy. Have a seat. So, with the permission of the organizers, I would also first actually thank them for organizing this, for hosting us, and I think for giving this discussion also the room. We heard today lots of discussions, especially on the challenges for Europe close to the borders of Europe. But there was also a session on the engagement of Europe and the so-called Global South, and I think this conflict is one, at least something coming from the region today, that will also define the future of Europe's engagement with the region. The title of the panel is called The Middle East on the Brink, What Role for Europe? And my theory is a bit that we have two Middle East realities right now. The first is the one that I think we will hear a lot from you, Luigi de Maio, and that is the cooperation with the GCC states, with the Gulf Cooperation Council countries. They are rich. They are actually the ones who become a security provider for us, where we can have discussions, at least European energy security on the brink, what role for the Gulf states. You will go tomorrow to the COP. So they are important partners for the fight against climate change. They are economic partners of the future. And at the same time, they normalize their relations with each other and with other important stakeholders in the region. And at the same time, they are becoming more confident. We have more, since you took over, a more narrative of an eye-to-eye relationship between the states of the GCC and Europe, where we can't call all the shots, and we also see a diversification of alignments, especially when the UAE and Saudi Arabia decided to join BRICS. And then we have the Middle East. Then we think of these days, Sarah mentioned it, and what we think of when we hear Middle East on the brink. And that is the other, the so-called maybe even have-nots, the ones when we think about displacement, migration, the region most affected by climate change, the region where just a year ago women went on the street and were shot for their call for freedom, where we see violence and conflict. And the role of the European Union here is not really clearly defined. You have heard it earlier from Anne-Marie Slaughter, who thought maybe the European Union could play a role in solving this. So we will try in the next 45 minutes, let's see how much time we get, to mend these two worlds, to think how they interact. What does it mean for the European Union to play in these those fields? And certainly, of course, the important question, what could Europe, what could Germany do to ease the suffering, to finally now solve this conflict. Mr. Röttgen, this morning when I looked at in your bio, I realized that 1 year before you joined the Bundestag the first time in 1994, it was the Oslo Accord. There was actually peace in the region quite close, so I think you will also be a bit of an expert on how many times maybe Europe had this awakening moment and then tried, and unfortunately till this day failed. But I'm not, I said what I wanted to say, and now I will take over my role as the moderator and ask you, Mr. De Maio, because I said that tomorrow you will fly to Dubai for the opening of the COP conference. You travel a lot. In the last months, I mean, you've been basically every day traveling to the region, especially after October 7th, after the attack. Maybe you can give us an insight into your conversations with the partners, the interlocutors in the Gulf states. What are the questions that they ask to you as a representative of the European Union? Which tracks were derailed? Where do you build your work on?
Thank you very much. And first of all, thank you very much for the invitation and for the invitation for this panel. I would like to underline that, as you know, probably, I was appointed on June 1st, so I experienced the first round of trips in the region before October 7th. But then we organized in Oman on October 10 the Joint Council EU-GCC at ministerial foreign ministers level, and it was 2 or 3 days after the October 7th. As Minister Baerbock today morning said, we arrived at the Joint Council as member states with a clear position, because at the time the European Union already condemned, obviously, the terrorist attack against Israel, the terrorist attack of Hamas, obviously supported the right of Israel to defend itself according to the international law, and the international law applies everyone, both sides, and for all civilians. Then we started the support and the collaboration with the GCC countries in order to free the hostages, and then immediately after, even working about the humanitarian pauses, the humanitarian aid support, and how the process for how to revive the two-state solution. I'm using this list of clear points and position of the European Union, because when we arrived at the Joint Council on October 10, it was not necessarily sure that we were going to have a final statement. On one side, the Minister of Foreign Affairs of the GCC, of the 6 countries of the GCC, and on our side, 27 member states with their foreign ministers. But we did it. We had a joint statement with a common language about Gaza, and it was the first step. Then recently I was in Manama, Doha, with Josep Borrell in order to meet the Prime Minister. And it's clear, as you said, there are different kinds of Middle East, but the GCC countries in particular that are in my mandate, together with Iran for the regional security, are main actors and important actors of the region for mediation. We can see Qatar about the hostages now. And even in order to support multilateral initiatives. It was very important that the Arab League and the OIC, they had this joint meeting in Riyadh, in Saudi Arabia, some weeks ago. And altogether, several countries with many differences, they appointed together the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Saudi Arabia, like the point of reference in order to organize this ministerial committee and to go around the world for the action about the outreach for Gaza. And it was very good that yesterday in Barcelona, as Minister Baerbock mentioned today during the speech, Josep Borrell invited them on behalf of the European Union in the framework of the Union for Mediterranean in order to listen to their ideas in order to revive the two-state solutions for Gaza, and in general, in order to create a common path in view of the peace. I have to say that there are many goals that we have in common with the GCC countries, but in general, with the line that they published and they agreed as OSCE Arab League after the joint meeting. First of all, the two-state solutions, stop the suffering of people, working about how to free all the hostages, the protection of civilians, the humanitarian aid, and I think the European Union, despite the divisions, because the member states, we had 3 different positions at the UNGA, but I have to say that despite the divisions among the member states, the European Union as institution is working on one side in order to recognize and support the right of Israel to defend itself. On another side, more than tripled the humanitarian assistance to people in Gaza, to the civilians in Gaza, is advocating for the humanitarian pauses. And this is the last thing. The humanitarian pauses appeared for the first time in a language in the Council's conclusions of the European Council recently. Then Malta, as member state, made the proposal at the Security Council. They approved. And now the humanitarian pauses are working in Gaza. They extended for another 2 days. Obviously, it's not enough. It's the first step. But it's very important in order to see the Israeli people, Israeli hostages that are coming back and are going at home.
Thank you. Mr. Röttgen, I just said it, that you have some experience in the Bundestag, and especially in foreign affairs, and the two-state solution, I think, points to the understanding that a military solution cannot really help to sustainably change the situation. So people are quick to call for saying this as a wake-up call. Now we have to find a political solution. Two-state solution is recognized the way forward, but given the current situation, also what Luigi Maio hinted at on member states' position, and also the survey from the Berlin Pulse showing that Germans are not necessarily eager to jump on every international crisis. Do you see a realistic pathway to peace where Germany or Europe can make a contribution?
So this is a mixture of different questions. So how is the general mood on seizing and living up to our level of responsibility, or is there no appetite? And what are the reasons for a lack of appetite? Could we expect even more? I think it's not realistic. It also depends how we are talking to the people about these things. Is there a path to peace foreseeable in the near future in the Middle East, in between Israel and the Palestinians, and what is the German or European contribution to that? So perhaps starting with the last, what can we do? I think you mentioned the awakening and the several awakenings in the Middle East history, of the recent history in the last 30 years or so. I think 7th of October has the meaning of a terrible awakening also for Europeans. I think that we should learn that we can't afford any longer to neglect the region. I think this is what we have done in recent years. We thought we have not to heavily engage in this region. And on the other side, there was perhaps a kind of one-issue engagement regarding Iran in our search to try to find any kind of renegotiation of the failed JCPOA. And these were the two elements, I would say. The region as such is not an important issue for us, has not been in the past. Now we have learned and have to learn that we can't afford this any longer, because we are learning that we can't separate European security, European stability from the stability of this region. So we have to engage. But as a consequence of neglect, we have not accrued any amount of capital we could now bring in. But I think we should draw the consequences of what we have learned. We have to do that. I think it has become extremely complicated now, of course, because what we have now is war again. which has made all questions open again, and there is no plan and no clue how to even stabilize the situation, not to mention peace. So I think we should start, perhaps realistically, more as nation states than as European Union. Of course, we should align it, but we have to be realistic about the quite different fundamental positions European member states are taking to that. Speaking for Germany, I think there is something to do for us. We should see and recognize with realism the terrorist link between the two worlds of the Middle East you mentioned in your introductory remarks. This is Iran. I think we have reason to change the German and European Iran policy. I think we have to analyze where we can more easily try to have a stabilizing impact, for example, regarding countries like Iraq, that are crucial, that are still fragile, but not yet a part of the Iranian influence zone. So to focus our efforts to do the best what we can to stabilize such a country like Iraq and others is something we should do. For the moment, I think it's important to stay the course as a country, to stay on Israel's side, and not to create confusion in this stance regarding our voting behavior in the United Nations.
Thank you. I would ask you a follow-up question, because you mentioned Iran, and also because of Hamas's obvious ties with Iran, it was an immediate question, an immediate concern, even before the first rocket from Hezbollah hit Lebanon, before the Houthi rebels started to attack, that this could be the spark that ignites a regional war and contradicts and pushes back against the trends of normalization that we have seen, even including Iran.
Yeah.
So luckily for most of us in the room, this has not happened, or for all of us, this has not happened, but still people would say Iran benefited, without firing a shot, benefited from the situation so far, and we still don't have a peace. So who can be our partners in the region? Because if everybody contains the crisis, it will not be solved. So who do you see as partners in the region?
Regarding Iran or in general?
Well, hopefully first regarding the situation in Israel and Gaza, and then regarding Iran, if you can connect.
So I think what we have to see with a high degree of relief is that all the Arab governments are absolutely keen and remain determined to stay the course of rapprochement, of regional rapprochement. Of course, at the same time, they are under massive pressure in their countries from their people, and from this perspective, you have to interpret what they are saying. And how they are communicating and behaving is their political approach to keep control on the mood and atmosphere within their people, and to remain able to pursue the policy which has now for the moment been thwarted both by Iran and Hamas and Hezbollah and others. So to express our German European appreciation towards the Arab governments, that we see their behavior, not condemn them, because it's not the rhetoric, of course, we apply in Germany, but that we understand their rhetoric, their communication and their policies, and that we want to do everything to make them, to enable them or to help them to stay the course, and that our interest is to find the moment to reconnect to what has been pursued as a rapprochement policy. Of course, that we see what has changed in the meantime, but that we should ensure them to stay this course, and that we work together with them to do it. So this is, I think, an essential element we should do. At the same time, My experience is that, of course, there is a absolutely fundamental, unequivocal perception, not only in the Arab world, but in the Muslim world, how they perceive the Israeli self-defense. And I think we have even to start now, as difficult as it might be, and as it certainly is, also to start with some participants of this community to start the dialogue, to explain our position, and not allow to be that a disconnect in our relationship emerges as a result of the war, because this would also be a part of the horrible death plan designed by Iran, that we sever our relationship and don't communicate any longer. I think this remains very important.
Thank you. Mr. De Maio, I said in the beginning that like before 7th October, obviously the agenda also of the cooperation between the European Union and the GCC states was also aimed a bit at long-term development. Now we have a war and we have to adjust to the crisis, and you already gave us that part of the story, but climate change, we see how affected the region is already, with the Gulf states as being both big producers of fossil fuels, but at the same time are partners in energy transition. Yeah. Could you give us, maybe before we then open, a bit of a glimpse in the long-term strategy where Europe and the Gulf states see, well, eye to eye on certain fields where we want to develop in the future?
I think that, I totally agree that there is a lack of the level of the relations. The relationship between EU and GCC now is not at the level that we deserve, in a way. And this is why, in a way, we were not very close to the region during the last decades. And you can see, for instance, that the European Union is negotiating. Then the negotiation received an halt in 2008, but we started the negotiation of the trade agreement EU-GCC 33 years ago. And the same is for the visa liberalization with some countries of the region. So we have to try to fill this gap of credibility. We have to engage them more in order to update and elevate the level of the partnership, in order to speak about the long term. What is the long term? I think that until October 7, and some weeks before October 7, the region experienced approximately in 3 years many dialogues, understandings, rapprochement. It was a huge amount of diplomatic activity in order to de-escalate and to support the prosperity of the region. When I was minister in 2020, I remember the period of the negotiation for the Abraham Accords. It was the first game changer. But then the Alula agreement for the normalization among the GCC, the unilateral ceasefire in Yemen, then the rapprochement Saudi-Iran, the recent understanding US-Iran for the hostages, and the Baghdad conference for Iraq, in order to try to stabilize Iraq and to work with them for the economic issues and prosperity. And finally, the dialogue between Saudi and Israel in order to have another normalization like UAE and Bahrain in the framework of the Abraham Accords. I think that all those experiences were a very good point of reference for us during the last years, and sometimes we supported even practically with funds, with projects, some of this kind of processes, some other times not. My opinion is that now we have a long-term tool. Obviously, on the short term, we have to try to solve with the humanitarian process and then a ceasefire the Gaza situation. But on the long term, despite the crisis in Gaza, the solution of the two states, it's the real point in order to make sustainable any kind of process in the region. Going to the climate diplomacy, you can see UAE is taking the leadership, has the leadership, the presidency of the COP28. But I have to say that during the months when I traveled to the region, I had the perception that they are ahead in some sectors, and we are undervaluating their progresses. For instance, by 2030, Saudi Arabia wants to be the first world supplier of hydrogen. But at the same time, Oman, they are already signing contracts with European companies for hydrogen. Some other countries, the most important and the biggest solar plant will be presented. There will be a ceremony in the framework of the COP28 next days in UAE. And each country there is working about these vision programs in order to make the diversification of their economies, because they are understanding that not only oil and gas are going to finish, but there is even a financial issue that sometimes is, I think more and more in the future, we will see that the projects linked to oil and gas will be not bankable, because there are some financial rules that are reducing the access to the financial tools in order to implement new projects for this kind of sector. So they are investing a lot, and for instance, Saudi by 2030 wants to be the first supplier of hydrogen. According to REPowerEU, Europe wants to import by 2030 10 million tons of hydrogen. Obviously, we have to make a diversification in order to avoid the dependence from only one actor energy supplier. But in my opinion, there are many things that our companies, our economic sectors are already doing with them. The real new step is to try to elevate the partnership at the regional level between the GCC as countries and organizations and European institutions, because there are a lot of projects, even in the framework of Next Generation EU, New Green Deal, there are a lot of projects that are really similar to the vision programs that I'm seeing and I'm experiencing there.
I will take a last question and then we go to the UAE. Because I mentioned in the beginning that, and I forgot Iran, like Iran and Saudi Arabia and the Emiratis joined or promised to enter BRICS, and you mentioned that the relationships are not so close yet. So do you see the EU as a competition with China and also Russia, which now reached out more and are maybe quicker even than institutionalizing the partnership?
I think that we have to be scared of our inactivism and not of the Chinese activism there. Because in any case, every kind of actor is trying to play a role in the region, because it's a region, an incredible region where you have only about trade, 20% approximately of the goods in the trade network that are going through the region, through the strait there. And you have, I don't know how many, 10 or 20 million, you have a quantity, a very important quantity, without to mention the numbers, of oil production that is going through the region. So you know very well that it's a strategic region, not only for the fossil fuels, but in general for the market at global level. So everyone is trying to play a role in the region. But we have the condition, there are the conditions and the basis in order to invest in the relations with them. And I have to say that even as European Union, yes, the BRICS created the BRICS countries invited Saudi and Emirates for the BRICS Plus. But a few weeks afterwards, we signed the IMEC, the economic corridor between India, Saudi, Emirates, Europe, with some countries that signed even directly, not only with the President of the Commission, and US. And now it's on us, obviously, after the peace between Israel and Gaza, and after the Gaza crisis, is on us to implement this kind of corridor. And again, we have the tool, and it's a huge tool, because so far it's an MOU, but the implementation of this MOU, that is a new corridor for goods, energy, and data, it's huge, and it's a very important opportunity in order to show that we have a link, that it goes through 3 regions in order to implement a common policy, not only on the economic side, but when it comes to energy, goods, and data, we are speaking about our security and our strategic sectors.
Thank you. Now I will open the floor for questions and comments. I already see some hands. I have the iPad here, which also brings like technical expertise, but I also wanted, we have an input or a comment from a former Munich young leader from Israel, from the Israeli Ministry of Defense, and I will read his comment to you, but more as an insight in, I think, the dark and emotional state that we are. It's not necessarily a question, but I think it's a comment we should hear. For the last 53 days, Israel is fighting a bitter war, forced upon us by a murderous and barbaric foe. The horrific atrocities Hamas perpetrated on October 7th invoked in many Israelis and Jews around the world memories of the Holocaust. From the ashes of the burned kibbutzim, we rose to fight to protect our lives, our very right to exist. Hamas tried to break our spirit. It failed. For our survival, we must ensure terror will never prevail and such atrocities can never happen again. We're making every effort to release our kidnapped citizens. At the same time, we must eliminate Hamas militarily and governmental capacity in Gaza, while thwarting ongoing Iranian proxies attacks on other fronts. Our operational activities include extensive humanitarian effort to minimize harm to Gazan civilian population used by Hamas as human shields. We are fighting against Hamas, not the people of Gaza. We fight as a democracy. Israel does not seek to occupy Gaza. Defeating Hamas will open new opportunities for the region. Full disclosure, this is from a member of the military, of the Israeli Ministry of Defense, but I think it speaks also of the emotions and the trials that the people in Israel went through. On this sobering account, I would give you the floor first, and then the light is so bright. Okay, good. There. And, yes.
No? Well, I'll try to be brief, and it's very interesting to see how disconnected the information space that we live in between Germany, Europe, and the Middle East. We have totally different facts. Maybe they're overlapping, but they will come with different interpretations. And that is a crisis on its own. And assuming we have a dialogue at some point in the future, all wars end. For the question for both of you, what are the two things that you want to speak about from a European perspective? What also are the two things that you want to hear and understand from the other side? Just to avoid what happened to happen again.
Okay, is it okay if we collect a few points?
Okay. Yeah.
I have a pen and a paper.
No, it's okay. It's okay.
All right, then here, Sam. Is the microphone?
Sorry, I was just given the mic.
Sorry, I put you on the right line, so you go first and then...
Thank you. My name is Jasmine El Gamal. I'm also a former Munich Young Leader, a former Middle East advisor at the US Department of Defense for 8 years under President Obama. Obviously, October 7th was a huge shock for everyone. It was extremely painful for all of us, not just who've worked on the region, but who've lived in the region and just as humans. And when we talk about the need for a lasting, sustainable peace, which is, I think, something that everybody can agree is necessary, I do feel like there's a bit of an elephant in the room that I would like to get your thoughts on, which is that obviously on the Palestinian side, Hamas is a terrorist organization. It's not a partner for peace. It never will be, and it has to be defeated. However, on the Israeli side, we've seen in recent years more and more extreme sort of viewpoint on the part of the Israeli politicians and Israeli officials that are currently in the government. So someone like Minister Ben-Gvir, for example, who has been convicted of a long list of crimes, including incitement to violence and supporting terrorism. Just today, I was reading that Prime Minister Netanyahu has reportedly been lobbying with Likud backbenchers to try to protect his political position after the war. And one thing he's saying in order to make his case is that he is the only person in Israel who can prevent a Palestinian state from taking place either in Gaza or the West Bank. So with such an extremist position on the Israeli side as well, what role can the European Union or Germany as a country play to, on one hand, continue to support Israel's right to defend itself, as every country should, but also to push it to make concessions that it seemingly has no intention of making? Thank you so much.
Thank you. So then we go around, and then there was someone here. Yes.
Yes, hello. My name is Azim El Difraoui. I'm a political scientist with the Candid Foundation in Berlin and Paris. If I see the title of this panel, the Middle East of the Brink, makes me slightly laugh, in not a very pleasant way, in a sense. The Middle East on the brink, the Middle East has been on the brink for the last 30 or 40 years, That's my personal feeling, but I have some very concrete questions, especially to the role of Germany. I mean, Germany assumed its parts of its historical responsibility in terms of recognizing the Shoah completely, unconditionally supporting the state of Israel, contributing a lot of money to humanitarian aids towards the Palestinians. But especially Germany never assumed political responsibility or engaged politically, geopolitically in the Middle East to contribute to this mantra of the two-state solution. In a sense, we always took a very convenient path. So my question is, which concrete steps could especially Germany, maybe as a leading player in Europe, take? Oslo was prepared by, let's put it this way, informal talks of reasonable elements on both sides. And the whole process was started. Now this is very difficult to achieve two-state solutions. Shouldn't we be on the forefront of initiatives, bringing those sides together, even if the emotion is very high? So I think we really need to think creatively, not hide behind the United States, not hide behind the European Union, and go forward. So to Mr. Röttgen, what could concretely be done? Can something more be done very quickly? Thank you.
Okay, I will maybe give you now time to answer. We have time for a second round, and maybe, Mr. Röttgen, we start with you on the question, what are we doing on Israel, but also on the two-state solution, and then the question, what do you actually also want to hear and learn from the region, if I understand that.
So the first question was, what would you talk to, what would you, the subjects, what would you like to convey if the dialogue started? I think there is one essential message to both sides, and this is the message to the Palestinians that this war does not benefit the Palestinian people. This is a war where the Palestinians and civilians have been abused as a shield for waging a war. And for political goals that do not aim to establish peace in the region. So this causes the suffering of the Palestinians in the first place, what has been started by Hamas. And the second question, the second message to be conveyed would be to the Israelis, that without a viable perspective for the Palestinians to have their own government in their own state, there will not and never be peace in the region. It has turned out an illusion that there is a possibility to close up the desire for self-determination and the entire Palestinian fate into a territory and compensate this not resolving the domestic problem by pursuing a regional rapprochement. So these are the two lessons, the main basic lessons. We have to talk to them. I think there is a learning process, perhaps, by themselves, but we could contribute in organizing, perhaps, facilitating such a dialogue. And these two core messages, who is winning and who is losing, and that there is a mutual interest in peace for both of them. The second question was the
Israeli government.
Yes, so of course I share completely the description of the situation you have given, and is there an opportunity of support by Germany, from Germany, and this also comes very close to the third question which was raised. I think we should be realistic about what Germany can do in the short term. We should realistically assess. What we can do is, I think we have the ability to talk to the Israelis. They are listening to us. There is a viable relationship of communication. However, I would not overestimate our possibility to influence the Israeli decision-making. They have been attacked in the most brutal and a dangerous, existentially dangerous way in their entire history. So they have the collective feeling it's our responsibility to decide. Of course, we know we have friends, we appreciate the friendship, and we should be credible in our support. So the more credible we are, and I have to just only mention the abstention in the United Nations General Assembly resolution voting, was not a contribution to our credibility in supporting Israel. So maintain the credibility of our support, which gives us at least the possibility to talk to them. But they feel under existential threat. The security backbone for Israel has been the United States. They are the only one to project power from the United States to the region. We are not able to do that. So since this lack of power we can wield there is in the short term, I would say, very, very little possibility for political impact and influence. In the longer run, when it comes to facilitate a process, there might be opportunities from us, and then perhaps it might even become more a tough question to us. What does it really mean that the protection of the existence and the security of the State of Israel is part of our raison d'être as a state? And we should be ready to contribute and to live up to this identity of Germany. And I am not in doubt that there is a broad majority in our people and in Parliament to deliver this support when the time and the moment has come to realistically do it.
Thank you. I was a bit too optimistic with our time. So I would give you, actually, Luigi and Maio, the last word. But I would like to pick up the point that was made also on what are we trying to understand, because I can also attest that the information space is very different. It's sometimes two different worlds. We talk about different things, but when you say what are the message, but also what is something that when you travel to the region, what you're asking people, what you're trying to understand?
I have to say that the ambition to be strategic partners on both sides, it's I think it's the ground where we can build our new level of relationship. Obviously, I'm not speaking only about the GCC according to my mandate. When you travel to the region, it's clear, and when you visit the region, it's clear that you are speaking with interlocutors that despite the differences and sometimes even strongly different positions, they look at the European Union, sometimes at European continents, some other times to the European Union, like an actor of diplomacy. And this is very important, and it's a very good starting point. So we have now finally a strategy, a little bit in late, but we approved on 2022 We have a strategy in order to elevate our partnership with the region. In this strategy, there are more than 2 things, but I think that on the other side, it's very important to listen to their priorities and to hear from their voice the idea to be strategic partners of our member states and our European Union as institution. About the situation of the 2-state solutions, obviously now the situation is polarized. Israel is still under the missiles of Hamas and is still trying to free the hostages. So it's clear that the situation is polarized. But again, as the Arab countries try to be together and united using the OIC Arab League joint meeting in order to regroup their strategy, as European Union, we have to make this effort to be more aligned in order to work with them. Because at the end of the day, I'm perceiving that despite the differences, there is the ambition to work with us, even about Gaza, about the Gaza crisis, and about the 2-state solutions, that I fully agree, I think is the main security guarantee for Israel, and we have to work about that. Obviously, it's not easy. Oslo, it was a lot of years ago, and we are still there in terms of implementation, but probably because of this dramatic situation, we are able to revive the process according to the emotional reaction of the public opinion.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for the questions. Sorry for the ones we couldn't take, but I think it calls for another panel at the next Berliner Forum. Thank you, and over to you, Sarah.